morning, everyone. Please have a seat. How are you? Commissioner, how are you? Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for
we'll
having me.
go right to you.
Hey, good to see you. How are you?
Congratulations. I haven't had a chance to do it in person.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to see you.
Pleasure to see you, too. Very nice to join us.
Oh, thanks. No, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Okay, great.
Good morning, Chairman Rivera and Commissioner Pai. Welcome to the fall meeting of the Advisory Committee for Diversity in the Digital Age. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedules to be here this morning, and also on the telephone, and we'll do a telephone attendance a little later. You have an agenda at your seat and also a copy of the PowerPoint that's going to be presented this morning. Thank you for your committee work over the last few months. I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Rivera in just a moment. We're going to vary a little bit from the schedule as there are some people with time commitments throughout. Chairman Rivera.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me thank you all for coming and for the time that you've devoted to the work of the committee during the interim between now and our last meeting. Some of the subcommittees have been busy, and I know recently some of them have been very busy, so I appreciate very much the time and effort that you all have put in. We're going to try to get back to a quarterly meeting schedule going into next year, and Tom Reed has an interesting report that I hope all of you will pay close attention to. We, as you can see, have been joined by two of our two new commissioners. And hello, Commissioner. How are you? Nice to see you.
How are you? Thank you.
We're going to proceed like we normally do and ask the commissioners to address the group if they'd like to do that, and then we'll move forward with our meeting business. So some of you will have to leave. Some of you have already told me you've got time commitments, you've got planes to catch, you've got other meetings you've got to go to. And so you may see people coming and going, and that's just par for the course. And again, I thank you all for your time. So Commissioner Jessica, would you like to talk to us?
All right. This is what happens when you have a long last name like this. They make it shorter, you know. It's going to be easy for you. Yes. Don't worry about it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Henry, for chairing this group. It's so important. Thank you for having me here today. There are a lot of familiar faces here, but some that I don't know. I just wanted to say that the work you do is really important. It's important to the Commission, but it's also important to me. It's one of my bedrock principles that when it comes to decision making in regulatory agencies, in boardrooms, or on Capitol Hill, that the best decisions get made when there's a diversity of opinions and perspectives sitting at the table. And we all know that women and minorities have long been consumers of communication services, but they've had less opportunity to participate in ownership. So I am looking forward to reviewing the work that this committee produces. And more importantly, I'm looking forward to your recommendations about how we're going to fix some of this. I actually wish I could join you for a longer period today, but the people calendaring me in the office already have a meeting waiting upstairs. I will tell you they're going to wait just a little bit longer because I have one other point that I want to make. It may be obvious to say this, but the new economy is built on technology. In fact, science, technology, engineering, and math are the fastest growing fields on our economy today. There are 3 times as many STEM jobs available as any other kind of jobs for new graduates. Yet women hold half the jobs in this country, roughly, but they hold less than a quarter of all the STEM jobs. And when it comes to minorities, the numbers are even worse. For Hispanic and African American workers, they account only for 6% of our STEM workforce today. So if you sit here today and you work on technology issues, I want you to know that you are a role model in my eyes, and I mean that sincerely. So in addition to all the things we're tasking you with and all the burdens that sitting on this committee places on you, I want you to think about what you can do to march more women and minorities into STEM jobs. Because ownership and opportunity, as I think you all know too well, is a very long road. And crowding that road with people with the skills to get us there, to expedite it, and to make us stronger when we arrive is an important thing to do. So I am eagerly awaiting your reports on supplier diversity, on unlicensed spectrum, on equal opportunity enforcement, on market entry barriers, and what we can do with channels 5 and 6. But I also want you to give some thought to what I just said about STEM opportunities and the role models that every one of you actually is, and the importance that plays in the new economy. In any event, my office is always open when you're here. Please let us know. We'll set aside some time for meetings. And when the time comes to recharter this committee, I just want you to know that I will be the first signing up to make sure that we do so. And I bet you he's going to be the second. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Warden-Worsel. We appreciate that very much, and your thoughts, and we will certainly take your challenge into consideration. Absolutely. So, Commissioner Pai, the floor is yours, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you once again for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak to you. It is, as my colleague said very eloquently, a delight to see a number of people who I've known and worked with, in some cases, since my days in law school, believe it or not. And I look forward to getting to know the rest of you, too, as you continue your important work on this committee. I can't really improve upon what my colleagues said, but I did want to say that one of my overriding priorities at the Commission has been to try to identify and to remove regulatory barriers that stand in the way of competition, innovation, and investment. And I don't think you need me to tell you that that priority is nowhere more keenly needed than in the area of minority ownership and the ownership by a variety of disadvantaged groups. I have seen it in my work here at the Commission when I'm looking at the printed page, but more importantly, I've had a chance to see it in the field when I went back home to Kansas, and I heard from a small businesswoman in Oswego, a town of 2,000 people, who said that she wasn't able to get a broader market for her goods because she didn't have a broadband connection. I saw it when I was in California recently, and we heard about impediments to broadband adoption that are unique to some of the minority communities in the Central Valley. We see it all over the place. Last week I had an opportunity to speak with Jim Winston and the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. And one of the unfortunate statistics is that despite gains in the 70s and 80s in terms of minority ownership on radio, the number of broadcasters that are black-owned has decreased in recent years, not increased. So I'm very hopeful that you will think creatively, as my colleague said, to come up with ways that we can change some of these trends, that we can ensure greater broadband adoption, we can ensure more minority ownership of telecommunications facilities, that we can identify different things that the Commission can and should do sooner rather than later to make this vision a reality. And I'm hopeful that we will do that working together with you. One of the things I've come to learn in our short time at the Commission, 4.5 months, is that it really is an agency that benefits from robust public participation. That comes most obviously in the form of comments in our proceedings, but I think advisory committees such as this one are so critical because you are experts in this area. You know what's going right and what's not going right. And for you to be able to give us input that will allow us to make better decisions is so valuable to us. And so thank you for taking the times out of all your busy schedules. We really appreciate it. And as my colleague Jessica Rosenworcel said, if there's ever anything that we can do to make your job easier, let us know. We have an open door policy, and we do always encourage you to take advantage of it. So thanks very much, and look forward to hearing from you in the near future.
Thank you. What's that? Probably until about 3:30 or 4. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioners, for joining us and for your interest in the work of the committee. It's very important for us to understand that you guys are interested, so it helps a lot for you to be here. Thank you. Uh-huh.
Thank you.
Mr. Usden here? Oh, great. Would you like to tell us about the Connect to Compete?
That would be great.
All right.
Does everyone have the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't.
Oh, you don't? Would you like help?
I like to show up cold and get handed a presentation.
Phone
And then
bridge open. I want to make sure. Jeff, is the phone bridge open? Hopefully the phone bridge is open.
great.
And if it is, all those on the phone, you've received a copy of the presentation by email.
Great. Well, good afternoon to everyone here and those listening on the phone. My name is Jordan Usdan. I'm director of what we call the Office of Public-Private Initiatives here at the FCC. It was an office started by the chairman earlier this year, actually. And what I work on every day is trying to work with the private sector and philanthropy to solve public policy problems through the use of technology, and broadband. So some areas I'm focusing on are digital learning and education, healthcare, health, cybersecurity for small business, but also the issue of broadband adoption. So today I was asked by Tom to come in and speak to you a little bit to give you a quick update on Connect to Compete. So Connect to Compete is actually a nonprofit, a national nonprofit that was started earlier this year, but launched, by the chairman, who convened a bunch of people in the space, the broadband providers, the device providers, the content, the nonprofits active in the space, and said, hey, this is a major problem, but there's a win-win here, which is a good thing, for some technology companies. So, what are some things we could do together, to make a down payment on the 100 million Americans who don't have broadband? So I'm here to give you a quick update on this, and happy to, take any questions. So I know all of you are intimately familiar with the challenge, but it bears repeating again. About 100 million Americans don't have broadband at home in this country, and about 66 million of them actually are digitally illiterate, and by that we mean they've never used the internet. It's not something that they only use it once a week at the library, but 66 million of these, so two-thirds of all the non-adopters, don't use the internet, whatsoever. However, in the past few years, there has been some, positive momentum. Broadband adoption by minorities is up about 10 percentage points over the past few years. Smartphone penetration, there are some positive trends there. So it's not all monolithic.
There's a little thing to do.
Oh, great. So I should be flipping through this as well. Got it. So again, the barriers to adoption, which I'm sure you're familiar with, are digital literacy, the basic skills needed to use the computer, both cost of the service, but also cost of the device. We've seen in some recent research that came out that actually a substantial amount of low-income Americans do not have a computer at home, and that's a huge barrier to access. So far more than you'd think. Tens of millions of Americans have no computers at home. And third is relevancy, which is really the value proposition. And so the price sensitivity of these populations comes far down when you make it more relevant to them. So Connect to Compete, again, is a nonprofit, non-governmental entity that was set up late last year. It's a coalition of industry, nonprofit, government, and community organizations. It's chaired by a great guy by the name of Ben Hecht, who is the CEO of a nonprofit called Living Cities, which works to enhance economic development in the inner cities in this country. So he's a great partner to have. And Connect to Compete recently hired its first permanent CEO. His name is Zach Leverins, and I'm sure he'd love to meet you all if you'd be so kind. For some advance notice, I could have him come here and meet all of you. I'm sure he'd love the interaction. So he's fantastic. He's run a couple nonprofit startups in the past that have been very successful. So the update is that Connect to Compete is going to be rolling out with some great offerings in the fall, which is now. So we're in the midst of rolling out, this week and next week. I'll get to the extent of the rollout in a second, but the basis of the offering for broadband is $9.95 internet with no fees, no modem fees, equipment fees, no installation fees, kind of no gimmicks up front. It is the basic minimum tier that ISPs provide with a minimum of 1, but most are higher than 1. So Charters, I think, is 12 megabits per second. A lot of the other ones are in the 3 download range. And it's open to anyone who goes to those schools that's eligible for free school lunch and doesn't have broadband currently at home. This is paired with an offer from the Connect to Compete PC refurbishment partner called Redemtech. They are selling laptops that are corporate class, that are refurbished and loaded with the brand new Windows operating system, which is now Windows 7. It will be Windows 8, later this year or early next year, and then also comes with a Microsoft Office suite, which is in itself worth a couple $100. So it's a really good deal. Comes shipped to the home, and they shipped about 400 of these computers during a pilot earlier this year, and I think only 1 or 2 got returned. So they're really good quality. And then there's, of course, digital literacy. So early next year, they'll be rolling out a national ad council campaign on digital literacy. They're developing a digital literacy finder app so that you could know, if you put your zip code in or call the 800 number, you could know all the providers in your area that will give free training. This is libraries, this is job centers. I could give you a quick demo of the beta version of this if it'll let me click on this link. Otherwise, I could send that out to you. Let's see. Just type it in. So this is the home page. Sorry, it's a little slow. Here we go. So this is the beta version, but the idea is that if you go and see the ad council campaign, that it gets you excited about learning about computers. You will then be able to go to this website, or also you call an 800 number or use this on your mobile, and put a zip code in, like my zip code in Washington D.C., and then you could see the training providers. Maybe wrong. Kevin, do you want to see if you could try to get this to work while I go through the rest of the... I don't know if it's a slow internet or what. My phone wasn't working earlier today upstairs, so... So going to the next slide here. I'm a couple behind. Just want to give you a quick update on the rollout and on the pilot this summer, then we can take questions. There's a partner slide here just to show you that Connect to Compete is working with a lot of partners, both tech companies, the civil rights community, the United Ways of the world, who are partnering as both outreach partners and digital literacy partners. So some really good results from the pilot this summer in San Diego. Connect to Compete ran a pilot with about 16,000 students across 50 schools in San Diego with the 2 offerings. 819 families signed up for broadband, which is far higher than expectations. So just in a 2-month period, you were able to reach 9% of the eligible population. So think about if you rolled this out to all the schools in this country, that if you did this over 2 years, not just 2 months, what percent of all the students who don't have internet at home could you reach? Could you reach 20%, 30%? I mean, that's huge. You're talking millions here. So really promising results. And also the computers were purchased at a fairly high rate. 612 families bought computers, which is about 3 to 4% of all the eligible families. And there was heavy phone traffic, 4,800 phone inquiries, but also heavy web traffic. So the question was, if you're having a broadband adoption offering and people don't have it at home, can you make the web available as a way to purchase it? It kind of seems like a catch-22, but actually these people are going on at libraries, at their schools, at their community centers, and they know how to go online and order something. So it was a good learning experience to see that actually does work and lowers the cost of customer acquisition, which is great. So now to some hard numbers for the fall. So they're going to be rolling these offerings out to about 20 states, partnering with 10 cable companies that will reach about 500,000 students in 1,000 schools. So that is ongoing right now, and into October it'll be completely rolled out, and the offerings will be up and live. The way that they are reaching these target customers is through flyers directly to schools. So when they go in and get their free school lunch application, they'll hopefully be handed a flyer from Connect to Compete and their cable company with the website and the 800 number on it. Also very exciting next year is the National Ad Council campaign on digital literacy. Think of, reading is fundamental, which is a very successful campaign on basic adult literacy. We hope this will be the same thing for digital literacy, encouraging people to go to their local training centers, the thousands of libraries and job centers that are offering free training in their community, and also try to attack what we call the relevance gap of people who aren't online. Why is this so important to your livelihood, to your job? How could you use the internet, to improve your life? And also, Connect to Compete is partnering with Comcast Internet Essentials program. Comcast is the biggest ISP in the country, and they've actually signed up, I think the latest numbers were 300,000 or 400,000 people to their program in the first year, which is pretty good. And so they will be partnering with Connect to Compete initially on some device distribution. But we think it'll be great if they could continue to partner on digital literacy and other things. All right, so we have the locator tool up and running. So just you've seen these before. It's based on like the Starbucks or the McDonald's, locator tool finder. So you could go and see in your community, who's providing literacy locations. So, you have the public libraries, you have the job centers, and this is the beta version. So we'll be adding more locations kind of as we go. So happy to take questions.
Great. Any questions for Jordan? Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question and a comment. The comment is I believe that the Asian American Justice Center is one of the partners, and it would be helpful to show the Asian American participation. But the question I have is the rollout and the ad campaign, is it just going to be in English, or will it also be in languages that might be accessible to parents of some of these students? And if so, what languages?
Sure. I believe their goal is to do it bilingual, Spanish-English initially. But it would be great if they're able to expand it to other languages. The flyer and the website will also be Spanish-English bilingual. But happy to talk with you, Karen, and I know I've worked with Jason also in the past about what would Chinese would be the next, probably most likely language that would be helpful to people in your communities. To see what we could do to help on that front.
Other questions? Yeah, Jim.
You mentioned that you're rolling it out in 20 states. Do you have a list of the cities?
I could get that to you.
I'd like to see. Absolutely. Thank you.
Andy.
What happens at the end of 2 years when the $9.95 deal ends? Is the expectation that people will be so attracted to the value of broadband at that point that they'll be willing to pay a full subscription price? And will it be possible for them to buy a naked broadband connection, or in order to get a decent price, will they have to bundle it with phone and video?
So as I understand it, Connect to Compete is working with the cable companies on the right approach to rolling people off these offers. So after the first 2 years of $9.95 internet, what happens next? I think in the pilot with Cox, and I'll have to get you the exact details, I think they decided that we will go and raise it a few dollars the first 6 months and another few dollars the next 6 months eventually to get to the market rate. So I think it was kind of an on-ramp, to the market rate. And yes, I think the idea is that a lot of these families are spending a lot of money on other telecommunication services, and they just don't see the relevance of broadband, and getting it to them, and then seeing the cost savings even from using the broadband as they go shopping online, will enable them to afford, the market rates eventually. Secondly, this offering does not have to be bundled with video services. So, ideally you'd want an affordable naked product.
Years, will they have to get a bundle?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
Congratulations, Jordan. I think this is a terrific initiative in Connect to Compete. My question is very similar to Jim Winston's question in terms of what are the plans beyond San Diego. I thought San Diego was an interesting market for a launch. Certainly like to kind of get some perspective on, are there plans to look at high density minority areas and including rural areas as well, and how do you seek the committee participating on Connect to Compete, whether individually or as a group?
Yeah, no, sure, good question. I will definitely get get Tom the state and city list. They haven't announced it publicly yet because it's as I understand, it's very complicated to work with 10 cable companies and get the rollout flawless. So they didn't want to be flooded, with phone calls. But they're going to do a public announcement about the cities and states, I think, 3 or 4 weeks in after their soft launch. So I could get that to you as long as it's not blasted around the world immediately. And I think it would be great if Zach comes in to speak to this group, who's the C2C CEO, and to get feedback on what you're hearing from your communities on the success of the program. What are the lessons learned based on Comcast experience? What can Connect and Compete do better? I think that would be probably a good way to engage, but I'm open to suggestions.
Well, I thought it was interesting because I live in Chicago, and in Chicago, Comcast is promoting the whole Internet Essentials initiative very, very heavily on the African American targeted radio stations, particularly how they're targeting the families who are enrolled in the school lunch program. So it was kind of interesting to hear how Comcast is strategically aligned to partner with this initiative.
Yeah, no, I think that's very exciting. I mean, they're the biggest player in the space right now, and so there's also a good communication lines between the two organizations, so that because they're learning quickly. Nothing like this has been done before. So there's been a lot of lessons from the first year of Comcast that's feeding into Connect to Compete, and also some things that Connect to Compete did, Comcast is adopting, such as automated enrollment. If you go to a really high school lunch school, to cut down on some of the red tape in enrolling in the program and other things like that.
Hey, Jordan.
Hey, how are you?
It's good to hear about the progress. I'm really excited. I just had a question around how the program is working with traditional philanthropy. Can you talk a little bit more about how foundations are actually supporting the initiative?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a timely question. So the Knight Foundation came out in support of it today. So they're giving a $3 million grant over 3 years. I think half of that is for the core organization itself, and half of that is for them for Connect to Compete to focus on target cities to roll out in person, on the ground, grassroots bodies, warm bodies to go and do the digital literacy training and the evangelizing around broadband. So that's very exciting. Carlos Slim is supporting the Ad Council campaign, and they are, their boots on the ground, going out there trying to raise money. It's a startup. It's a startup with a lot of resources, but it's a challenge for them to get the core operating budget to make sure that they could leverage all the commitments they got for the PCs and for the broadband. So, but I'm sure they'd love any. I'm sure if you guys know anyone interested, they'd love to hear from you on how they can participate with Connect to Compete.
Other questions? Jordan, I had a question. This is a private sector initiative as opposed to an FCC initiative. What is the FCC's role in this whole project?
Yeah, I mean, so we initially, first of all, there's a bunch of things we're doing on the regulatory front, which I'm sure you all know of. So I want to make sure this isn't just, we don't think you're going to solve this problem just the private sector. But in terms of the private sector, we try to see it serve as a convening body, bringing people together, idea generation engine, and talking about the importance and evangelizing about how important this is to solving a lot of our nation's problems, from education to healthcare. The ongoing role with Connect to Compete, we're invested in their success, so we check in with them every once in a while. But it's an arm's length relationship, So the FCC can't raise money, the FCC can't sell broadband, but it's just something that we keep in touch with them about, just like we would do any other similar nonprofits in the space, like the Joint Center. Secondly, Comcast Internet Essentials is a similar program. They have to report into us every quarter or semi-annually. So we're always eager to meet with them and not only just hear what's in their report, but actually hear from them, like, how's it really going on the ground? What are the lessons learned? What could other companies learn from what you're doing? So that's the type of role, we think is appropriate to play.
Well, I think it's a terrific initiative. Congratulations, and I wish you continued success. I know everybody on the committee does too.
Great.
And we appreciate your coming and spending some time with us today.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for giving me this time slot. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Tom, we've got a couple of subcommittee chairs that have got a scoot. Do you mind if we put them up now? Okay. So, David, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Honig. I'm the chair of the Equal Employment Subcommittee. Our charge was to design a survey relating to compliance that the Commission could consider administering to a sample of its regulatees, which presumably means Title II, Title III, and Title VI regulatees rather than Title I, where they don't have apparently jurisdiction. In response, the committee designed an instrument and a plan, submitted it in January. The title is Design and Methods of the FCC's Equal Employment Diversity Recruitment Survey, Telecom and Information Service Firms. Information service firms would be included in the survey, but not being direct regulatees, presumably their participation would be at their option. Some have, as you know, declined to provide EEO-1 data, for example, and that matter is still before the Labor Department. The Commission has this instrument, and after a draft sample that the committee put together before it for consideration. In the meantime, just to give you a sense of the scope of research that is being done, every year the National Association of Black Journalists produces a study of African Americans in television in significant positions such as general managers and news directors and photojournalists. That study comes out every year. It's longitudinal and been going on for, I think, 11 years now. It was released last month. The Radio Television Digital News Association, RTDNA, formerly known as RTNDA, the News Directors Association, has for about 14 years been putting out a survey which is understandably, because it's voluntary, they don't get full participation from the industry, but it's television and radio news staffing and profitability that looks at, and the best it can, kind of tracks participation of minorities in radio and television management and journalism, and tends to show that the numbers are kind of static or declining in some instances, especially in radio. In addition, a study has been had the data collected and is in the process of internal review by MMTC and the National Urban League, looking at publicly available data for the 20 largest telecom companies, 20 largest media companies, and 20 largest high-tech edge companies for their C-level executives and boards of directors. The next step in that process, the draft is virtually done, will be to share it with those companies, make sure that they regard the data as accurate, and if they have any comments on it, and then I expect in the next couple months it will be published. But that's not a complete answer, of course, to what our charge is, and I know there is still a need for the undertaking that the Commission set out to do, which is to look at the extent to which its own rules and policies have been effective, and one way to do that is to start with a compliance survey.
Okay, so it's basically a money issue in terms of the doing the survey.
Quite possibly, yes.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for David on that report? Thank you. Ron Johnson, are you on the phone?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fine.
Can you go ahead and give us a report, Ron?
Yes, I'm ready to go. First of all, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and to all of my colleagues. I certainly want to thank you for allowing me to make a brief report early on the agenda today, and for me calling in. Obviously, I would prefer to be there with all of you all, but certainly I just could not. I'm attending very shortly from there, I'm attending another event on telecom procurement, which will be very important to assessing to what extent diverse companies are engaged in major new telecom spectrum opportunities. And we think that's a very important event that we should participate in. Let me say, first of all, as all of you all know, the opportunity to look at the telecom industry best procurement practices is a great challenge given the many legal process and procedural questions that it raises. However, it is a very important aspect of the industry for us to review and for us to look at, exchange ideas and concerns with as many and as varied stakeholders as possible, and we've been trying to do that, and to do that in many different forms as possible. And we certainly thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to do this great work. To jumpstart this effort, the OCBO asks that I, representing the subcommittee, if I be willing to assist in developing a FCC-sponsored procurement summit, which was held in July. And certainly I know Attorney Reed will be giving more information about the summit in his remarks. In doing so, the purpose, from my perspective, was to do 5 things and report to our subcommittee these findings. Number 1, to ascertain industry's interest in participating in a process of looking at its best practices rather than just the traditional matchmaking events, although this was a very successful part of the summit. Number 2, to get a great sense of what industry's response would be to specific inquiries about its best practices, particularly if we pose these questions and inquiries in a collaborative and transparent manner. Number 3, to ascertain if there were specific and successful strategies that industry members were currently engaged in, and would they be willing to share these strategies and successes in an open audience. And number 4, to ascertain if diverse companies would participate in this process if we established a more full-blown one. And finally, get feedback and make an assessment on how this first step resonated with companies, including diverse suppliers. Now, at this particular point, comments are still being received and reviewed by OCBO, but my initial belief is that the summit was very successful and will serve as one major pillar of our subcommittee's work going forward. So we want to thank the OCBO for inviting us to participate. In addition to assisting with the summit, I have met with OCBO on several occasions to discuss our subcommittee's work. And as a result of these conversations and on a going forward basis, I intend to forward the results and feedback from the summit participants as well as our observations to all subcommittee members for their review and feedback, and hopefully we can do that in the next few weeks. Then we intend to convene a telecom meeting of all the subcommittee members to discuss and examine the information that we get from the OCBO and begin to design additional methodologies for working with our industry partners. And thirdly, we will then construct a list of expected outcomes from our subcommittee's efforts. And fourth, to continue to coordinate our efforts with OCBO office. And I think going forward, it will be important that I begin now to coordinate to a greater extent all our efforts and send periodic progress reports and status reports to all of our members so that we can ensure that they are engaged and that their opinions are heard, not only for me but for all of our fellow colleagues. In addition to that, we will be meeting on a telephonically, and at our next meeting of the we hope to have our preliminary findings based on our assessments and reviews that we're going to send out to prospective industry stakeholders. So that's essentially what we've done so far. We're moving, I think, ahead, but certainly the summit was the first big step in beginning to design the paradigm for where this study will go. I mean, it is certainly when you begin to look at these kind of issues, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, it does require a sense of not only due diligence but delicacy when you begin to talk about industry's procurement practices and how they can do better, and even what they're doing perhaps that's not as well as they should do things. So we are moving ahead with caution, but knowing that this is a very important item that you've assigned us to do, and we hope to have a full report by the end of the year.
Very good, Ron. Thanks for that report. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Seeing none, I'll thank you again, Ron. And it sounds like you've been very busy and very productive. I've been talking with Tom over the course of the summer and following your progress, and it sounds to be very exciting. And we look forward to a full report as soon as you can get us one.
Fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, I think we need to take a roll call so that we can.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to read names so everyone's not calling at once, and just say present if you're on the phone there. Anita Graham, Anita Stevens Graham.
Here.
Yes?
Yes.
Celia? Yes?
Yes.
Chanel?
I'm here.
Great. Charles Harrell?
Here.
Derek Frost? Derek? Going once, twice? Donna?
I'm here.
Dr. Cindy?
Yes, here.
Dr. Jorge?
Here.
Faye? Faye there? Javier? Got Javier here? Nope. Jose?
Jose Marquez here.
Great. Thank you. Loris?
Here.
Maria?
I'm here.
Mark Wallace? Mark Wallace? Philip? Philip? Robert Mendez?
Here.
Thank you. Tony Perez?
Here.
Walter?
Here.
William Brennan? William? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. I notice some of you on the phone have got your phones on mute, and we very much appreciate your doing that. Thank you. Now I'm going to go back to Tom Reed's report. It's a very important report, and I think fairly fulsome. He's got a lot of things to tell us, so we're glad you're here. And thank you and Carolyn for all the work you've been putting in on the committee during the summer months. We very much appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. Before I do my report on, I guess, what we've called the participation studies, the critical information needs studies, and let you know the status of that, I want to sort of cover a very important housekeeping matter, and that is, Commissioner Rosenwortel mentioned the rechartering. And I think, as all of you know, both the chairman and all the commissioners are committed and support the rechartering of this committee. The current charter expires at I think in mid-December. We've submitted the renewal papers and are just awaiting their approval. So we will be in touch as soon as that process is completed about reappointment. There are no conscripts, so this is still volunteer. We are not requiring that you sign up for another 2 years, although we certainly hope you will. In that process, I know a few of you have reached out to me. I know circumstances have changed, organizational changes and job changes. We will address those in the next few weeks in the reappointment process, so we'll get all that cleared away. Speak now or forever hold your peace if you think you don't want to show up for 2012 to 14. So, and then of course I won't be listening. Anyway,
well, that's very good news, Tom. And I do want to give the folks here an opportunity to ask you any questions about that rechartering or the rechartering process. It's going forward, and yes.
The time the paperwork is submitted typically until it's approved?
Well, we're hoping very quickly. I don't know I can give you an exact answer to that question. The process is already there. I mean, we're just waiting on final approval of the recharter paper. So as soon as that's done, having gone through this, we can get the reappointment letters out very quickly. But of course, we're going to get in contact with everybody because we don't assume that everybody is signing back up. But again, we hope you will. So that process shouldn't take too long. I'm hoping that we can move very smoothly into the first quarter of 2013 without any delay. I don't think we have anything scheduled for this current committee before the charter expires.
I'm sorry, I cannot make out. Can he get a microphone in front of him? Because we can barely hear him on the phone.
How's this? Can you hear me now?
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to jump to just an update on the participation studies, the critical information needs studies. I think, as everybody knows here, OCBO is tasked with identifying and examining what barriers may exist to participation in the communications industry and whether barriers impact how Americans access critical information. And we adopt an aim and then shoot philosophy, and that is we need to understand what's happening in the marketplace before we issue regulations and the like. In other words, in order to conduct a serious analysis of our policies, we first must have sufficient data to understand the media landscape, and to understand how our rules and regulatory policies impact that landscape. Only then can we determine whether regulatory change is necessary to achieve our statutory and policy obligations. As you know, Section 257 of the Communications Act requires that the Commission identify barriers to participation in the media and communications marketplace and to develop and promote policies that favor a diversity of media voices. The next triennial report is due in 2013 for the period ending this upcoming December. So we hope to get that out as soon as possible, but obviously the findings of these current studies we want to integrate as much as possible. Again, to better understand the impact of market entry barriers, earlier this year we commissioned a review of the critical information needs of the American public and how those needs are being met. A coalition of scholars, which was organized by the USC Annenberg School of Journalism, was commissioned to do the study as a preliminary look at our understanding of how groups, including women and minorities, access information through various forms of media, what we call the media ecosystem, and whether their critical needs are in fact being met. In July, we received the final draft of the Annenberg Group's report. Now, that report is available on OCBO's website. I believe if you go to the FCC website and link to us in our library, the full report is there. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I recommend that you do. There's a pretty well put together 10-page executive summary, which will be sufficient for you to understand what that group came up with. So I encourage everybody to avail themselves of that. That lit review was the first step at assembling data examining media ecologies and how Americans receive their critical information needs. And again, that full report is available. One of the things that the report said, just sort of in general, to talk about as we talk about critical information needs, it said the critical information needs of local communities are those forms of information that are necessary for citizens and community members to live safe and healthy lives, have full access to educational, employment, and business opportunities, and to fully participate in the civil and democratic lives of their communities. There are a number of categories that the group identified as being part of critical information, things that wouldn't surprise you. Emergency information, obviously, the kind of information that communities needed when Hurricane Katrina hit to direct them to where to go, what are the proper places to get to, what's safe and what's not. Health and welfare, educational opportunity, transportation, jobs and economic opportunities, environment, civic and political information. Those were a number of the categories that the group identified as critical to most Americans. Now, Lit Review suggests that while useful research has been conducted, and there has been much, an up-to-date, multidisciplinary, and more in-depth study of media ecologies is necessary for the Commission to meet its obligations under Section 257. So that's where we are now. We selected a company, Social Solutions International, which is a woman and Latina-owned company that's based here in Silver Spring, Maryland. And that company is a research, design, and data collection and analysis group, and they're leading the effort to continue the research that was started by the Annenberg Group. And I don't know if those of you know here, but in mid-September we had a research design conference in Bethesda. And that included a working group of economists, social scientists, and communications industry specialists to design a multi-city research strategy to determine how different media ecologies provide for critical information, how different communities acquire critical information, and whether barriers to participation in the communications marketplace may exist that might hinder the acquisition of critical information. So we tasked this group in September. It was a 2-day conference, and we tasked them with designing a mechanism. I'm very practical. I said, build me a widget, and it's something that we can put in a particular market area that will generate the kind of data that we need. Something that would be replicable for different markets, and that would have a top-down and a bottom-up approach, and I'll explain what that means. So the top-down approach, we wanted to understand how media infrastructures operate from the top down, and otherwise the supply side. Essentially, what kind of research mechanisms will enable us to understand or inventory what media or communications outlets are available to individuals and communities in different markets. Part of that is content analysis, what content is being provided to individuals and communities that suits their needs. And then the bottom-up approach is the demand side, and that is, how individuals and communities, including women and minorities, extract critical information from their particular media ecosystems. So the task that we gave this particular group was to design a fairly, I won't say straightforward, but a somewhat complex, both qualitative and quantitative system of analysis, so that we could look at what's happening in any particular test market. So they were hard at work on that for 2 days. SSI is working continually with that group to provide a report on a research design model that hopefully will be optimal and replicable again. And also to select a couple test markets where we'll be able to vet the research design model. So right now we're expecting a report from SSI. The final report is due, I think, in late November. And when we get the research design in the test markets, we can vet it, and then we can move forward. So that's where we are with the Critical Info Needs project.
Great.
So I'm available to take questions if anybody wants any
questions
specifics.
for Tom on that? Nicole.
Thanks, Tom, for the update on the research, because I remember when the FCC put out the request for information. So speak to us a little bit about the deliverable from this. Is the deliverable primarily to give us a foundation for some critical data that will actually help us understand the needs of citizens, at the most ground level? Or is it, after hearing the Connect to Compete piece, with technology always evolving, right? Is the other deliverable of this to figure out ways to do similar type of work that was just explained in Connect to Compete to ensure that the market also citizens also stay up to par with the marketplace? Because information changes so rapidly, as well as technology. So I'm just curious where the FCC wants to go with this.
Good question.
Sure, no, excellent question. And I'll tell you, you're going to get a number of answers to that. And I'll give you my perspective on it. Again, going back to my view is very practical. When you go back to sort of the constitutional framework here, one of the things that we have to identify is what is a compelling governmental interest. And certainly providing for the informational and critical informational needs of all Americans, including women and minorities and other diverse groups, is a compelling interest. But the deliverable at the end of the day, when we get to the goal line here, it should be that we've got data that tells us, okay, this is how the infrastructure is working for these groups. This is what this particular group needs. For instance, Latinas want information on cervical cancer. Where are they getting it? Is the media ecosystem providing adequate information on health for Latinas in that context? If it's not, is it related to the fact that individuals that are at the levers that are providing the content are not there? So we are hopeful that when we test this, we'll be able to see where the holes are. So we'll go to a particular community, and part of the task of this research group is to select. You're not going to find an optimal market, and if we had the resources, we'd be looking at 30 or 40 markets. But initially, we want to test a relatively diverse market and find out essentially where the holes are and why those holes exist. The holes being, this is how this particular group is not being served. It's information that they need. And if we want to be able to determine why they're not receiving that information. Is it because there's an ownership issue? There's underrepresentation of that particular group amongst owners that are providing the content. So hopefully that answers your question a bit more. And we want to be able to do that when we can test a couple markets. We want to be able to go further once we have this tool to be able to plug it into various markets so we can get a broader sense of what's happening across the country. And then we're going to overlay that. We hope to overlay that with national surveys. So hopefully that answers your question a bit. Jim.
Diane?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Tom, I probably made an assumption that's incorrect then. Is this study in any way connected to addressing the Adirond study lack that we've had for over a decade now?
Well, okay. I mean, I think the best way, yes, it is. I think the best way to talk about it, when I first started talking about, these studies, if they do what we intend, obviously they'll identify what the compelling governmental interest is. And once we've identified that, and if there, as I've mentioned, if there are holes in the infrastructure where individuals are not able to extract information that they need, we'll be able to determine why. And if we can determine why, if they're related to barriers that exist in the marketplace, then the agency then could narrowly tailor, in the language of Adirond, could narrowly tailor its curative approach to those lacks in the marketplace. So in that respect, absolutely, it's related to Adirond. But it's gone much further than that. Obviously, the last time the agency did studies of any scope like this were in 99 and 2000, and technologically things are vastly different. So our approach has had to match that change.
Chair, I have 3 questions. So how does the research that David was talking about fit in with this research? In other words, my understanding around the research that David was talking about was about compliance. And it seems to me that part of the ecosystem in terms of what's happening is understanding whether companies are actually following existing regulations in order to determine what that framework looks like. So that's one question. The second question is, do I understand correctly that part of this is going to be a survey of what minority, women, and other diverse providers are out there in terms of, for example, Latino radio owners or something like that? And then the third thing is, I'm always concerned about reliance on the national surveys because even the Census Bureau research in the area of technology tends to not take into account language, and it's generally only in English, which I think masks the deficiencies in the emerging immigrant populations in terms of whether their needs are being served or not. And since it's such a growing part of the community, I'm concerned about that as well.
Okay, let me see if I can take those in order. You mentioned David's research. I think, again, I'll say just sort of overlapping. This is in development, and we're working with a number of, SSI is working with a number, we've had about 20 academics and specialists in various areas, so this is in development. The study that David referenced was particularly related to EEO, and this is much broader than that. So I think that's the most I can say about that without getting into specifics that we probably need to sort of have a discussion with the folks who are in the midst of the design that may more accurately be able to answer that question for you. I understand your concerns about the survey. I think one of the realities that we have is that we have limited resources. That's the elephant in the room. I'll just call it out. We've got limited resources, so there are a number of, part of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to couple a very deep dive into individual markets and also addressing the concerns, and that the issue that you discussed in terms of language minorities and that type of thing, it's very much at the forefront of what we're talking about here as our specialists are sort of doing the research design. We're not just looking at traditional disadvantaged groups. We're looking at recent immigrant groups. We're looking at, again, language minorities. We're looking at the diversity in the Asian American community and also in the Latin American community. So those issues are being addressed. So I understand that. I understand your concern in terms of the national surveys, and that's an excellent point. We haven't designed those surveys yet, and that's something that was raised at our research design conference. So, but again, we're trying to couple sort of the case studies, the deep dive into individual markets with sort of a national overlay. So that's where the surveys come in. But that's a second part of where we're sort of just finishing the first step. So I think did that address all your questions, more or less?
So the third question was, so are you basically also taking, for want of a better word, a census of what all the different providers are that are out there?
That was definitely discussed. When we're looking at the case studies, I mentioned that one of the challenges that the researchers were looking at was how do we inventory. Let's say if we're in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. How do we inventory what's being provided in that particular market, whether it's traditional broadcast, what's being provided on the internet, what's being provided in various sources, what's being provided in print. So there will be an inventory of, like I said, top-down, the suppliers, what are they supplying, and some degree of content analysis. So I think that does take in, again, the question of who's doing the providing. So.
Other questions for Tom? Yes. Diane, I'm sorry.
Tom, to piggyback on kind of what Karen was saying, one of the questions that I think is going to overlap with some of what the subcommittee that we're working on, which is market barriers to entry. One of the things is we take a consensus or a census, if you will, of what is the ownership there. Is there going to be a way for us to also address some of the barriers to having more diverse ownership in those markets of the various entities that you're going to be looking at? Because that would be, I think we'd like to try and work with you on that, at least as it relates to that, so that we can, as part of our subcommittee's responsibilities, to be able to see what we're going to learn and how we can use that to come back to this group with findings, recommendations, et cetera.
No, that's great. Thank you, Diane. I mean, I definitely encourage your group to both take another look at the literature review again, and when this report becomes public in late November, to examine that as well. As I said, I think part of this process is determining who's doing the providing, and if there are gaps in the information that's being provided where individuals and groups and communities aren't being served, why those gaps exist. So without telegraphing or presaging what the result is we want to ask the question first: why do those gaps exist, and do they exist because people aren't being allowed to enter the marketplace? So that's certainly a central question, because otherwise, if we might identify the gaps, but if we don't know why they exist and if we don't know why they're related to maybe traditional discrimination or other issues that created barriers, then we really aren't going to be able to do anything from a policy perspective unless we understand. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? No. Yeah, Karen.
Will our advisory group have a chance to look at the plan of research before it actually goes into the field?
That I don't know. I think it's going to be made public in November, and it's going to be tested. And I think with anything that's made public, there'll be an opportunity to comment on it shortly thereafter. We probably won't be releasing the research plan internally. I mean, other than to internal groups or to advisory groups before the public notification.
But if you get it, if you got something to say about it, pick up the phone and call Tom once it's made public.
That's right. All those conversations are unrecorded, so we can.
Yeah, Nicole.
Tom, also, this is more of a research question as well. Are you going to go a little deeper around generational differences in the research? Because obviously some of the prior research has shown us that young people access different than more senior populations. So I'm just curious, with the different demographic groups, will there be some drill down that I think will be relevant to this committee as well as the general audience around trends?
That's a great question. I don't know. In the sessions that I sat in on, we had 2 days, so there were a number of things that were covered. I don't recall that generational differences were covered, although I suspect that they were. And certainly, I will add that to the mix, because we're in close contact with SSI that's putting together a report. So once we get, and there's going to be a full transcript that we have of the 2 days. So a lot of that's going to be thrown in the mix.
Okay, some potential for some very significant data that's going to come out of this, and I wanted Tom to go into some depth with regard to what he's doing and what's going on, because I think this has the potential to inform the committee's work, and you might want to keep in mind the fact that this data is at some point going to be available as you pursue your various tasks on behalf of the full committee. And of course, we have Tom here, and he will be helping us, and also will be very mindful of the existence of that data once it becomes available.
Just one last point, just to remind folks that what we're getting in late November, this is the government, so let's understand our timing. We're getting the report on the research, the actual research design, and then there's going to be a recommendation in that report on test markets. Some of that is dependent on resources. We want to do as much as we have with the funds that we have available. And then I'm not sure what the time frame is in terms of how long it's going to take to actually test the markets so that we get data back from the markets. I'm thinking, and don't hold me to this, that we're looking at December through probably most of the first half of 2013. And where we'll have data that's something that we can use. Probably we're looking at the second quarter of 2013, calendar 2013. I'll have more specifics, so if anybody has more questions, just shoot me an email, and I'll get in touch with SSI and also a couple of my folks who are working hard on it. We can get better estimates as to when we'll have that information back. And then once we have that, we've got a tool that we think we can use, then we'll go deep into other markets, and that again will depend on funding.
Right.
So, but thank you.
Tom, do you have anything else for us?
I think that was it.
Okay.
That was it. I think we're on.
Thank you. Great report. Appreciate
Thank
it. Yeah. All right, Diane, you're on.
Thank you.
And I know you got a plane to catch, so.
It's all right. It's not going anywhere yet.
Hopefully the seats will stay attached.
Yes, hopefully the seats will stay on the plane, and I am flying American.
Oh, no. Poor thing.
It's a direct flight, so we have a lot of opportunity for where they can leave us. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the privilege of chairing the Market Barriers to Entry Subcommittee. And as a way of background, and since our last meeting in August, we received direction from the Commission on how they would like us to proceed and what they're looking for from this committee. And in particular, we were tasked with examining the reintroduction and reimplementation of the tax certificate for the Commission's report to Congress at the end of the year. Most in the industry agree that the tax certificate was a good policy, despite suggestions that there may have been a few instances in which the policy may have been abused. Our efforts are really focused on providing information and data on how the tax certificate worked, anecdotal evidence of its success, and whether any gaps exist in the policy in its original goals, considering the current media landscape. Once we have this information, we'll provide it to this full committee so that we can see what are appropriate recommendations to send up to the Commission. Over the years, a number of tax certificate bills have been reintroduced into Congress, but they were unable to overcome two significant challenges, one being timing. There were never companion bills in both the House and the Senate at the same time, and two, they were unable to garner sufficient bipartisan support. Several organizations and ad hoc committees have examined a new tax certificate policy, and many have tried to include language to prevent abuse that would limit the policy to instances where minorities and women own more than 50% of the entity. This situation is not always possible where private equity is involved and needs to be considered in terms of the reality of the economic marketplace. Part of our challenge will be to develop language that could be used to ensure that entrepreneurs are in operational control but may not own 50% of the equity, which is the attempt that was being made to in previous bills that have been before Congress. Our group had determined that we now, after two conference calls with the committee as a whole, that we are aware that the media industry is completely different today than the one that was in place when the tax certificate was adopted. Consolidation has had and will continue to have a major impact on ownership. And looking toward 2013, we'll need to have discussions with the major media players that exist today, Clear Channel, Comcast, CBS, others, to see what their thinking is around minority and women entrepreneurship in today's economic environment. We need to determine what's in it for them, and are they looking for a tax certificate or some other way to work with women and minorities to make ownership possible. A number of other organizations have been working on this issue over the years since the tax certificate went away, and we want to bring them into our conversation. The one constant is that the tax certificate benefited both the recipient and the seller, but we may want to look at other ways to structure a tax certificate or some other idea that could work to increase minority and female ownership. For example, Clear Channel has donated radio stations to MMTC, which they are now selling, and there are other things that we might want to look at as ways, in addition to the tax certificate, that could be potential ways to increase diversity and ownership. However, we have been asked to focus on, the Commission has asked us to focus on recommendations on the tax certificate policy, so that is our primary goal. And toward that end, the committee has divided into two task forces. One will be to work to gather historical data, information and what has previously been written by law firms, other organizations that have talked about the tax certificate, what has happened with it, and what the history has been, to try and amass that data on the use of the tax certificate. And number two, the second committee is going to be working on anecdotal evidence to find examples of success stories where we can identify people who have participated in the program and built a successful company because of the use of the tax certificate. Our hope would be to put a face, if you will, on the tax certificate, not just to provide statistical information. A big part of this project will be to reach out to other people and organizations that have an interest in this and are willing to donate their time and work with us. To date, we have contacted by email David Honig at MMTC, Jim Winston at NABOB, Aaron Fuller at AWM, Jane Mago at the NAB, Tony Koch-Bush at Skaden, and we've asked for their participation and assistance with identifying historical data, articles, examples of individuals and our companies that have utilized the tax certificate when it was in force. We've also contacted NTCA to enlist their help in providing background information. I had the opportunity to speak with Frank Washington, who many of you may recall was the last individual that was seeking to do a deal with the tax certificate. And I think that he told me this is the first time anyone has ever called him to ask him about what he thought happened and what might be the future and where we go. He has agreed, promising that if we will actually listen and do something with the information, was the qualification that Frank had, that he has a lot of information, has a lot of history, and had previously done a number of deals utilizing the tax certificate, which have been very successful. So I think he is going to be a good and interesting resource for us, and one that we would be remiss in not including, since his deal became the lightning rod, if you will, for the dissolution of the tax certificate. So a better understanding of what happened then and what the differences are between what happened at that era and where we are today. We are also planning to contact Frank Montero at Fletcher Hild and Hildreth for some of the work that he has done and things he has written, NTIA, and John Oxidine, who headed BroadCap at the time of the tax certificate. So those are the people we've identified at this point. We welcome your ideas, your contacts, your suggestions to help this the subcommittee as we assemble this historic data as well as the anecdotal information, so we can provide recommendations going forward. It's a lot to do in a very short period of time, so all incomers are greatly welcomed, and we look to be inclusive in this. A number of our committee members are here. I would ask that you would just raise your hand so people in this room know at least who in this room is working with us, and that if you would indeed talk to any one of us, we would look forward to that. And is there anything that any of the committee members would like to add to that report? All right, then. All right, then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the report of our committee.
Thank you, Diane. Great report and great work. And if you are reached out to by the subcommittee, I hope you will give them every cooperation. They're doing some important work, and we sure do need the tax certificate back or something like it. So
it is interesting how many people don't really know what that even was. Mm-hmm. It was 1996, I think, is the dissolution of it, and there are an awful lot of
95.
Thank you. Even longer. And there are a lot of people who really are unaware of it and don't recognize that it had a lot of success during the time and made a major difference in the number of minorities that we had in ownership. So I think it's important to at least have the conversation, and whether this is the only or the best way, it's certainly one way, and hopefully it will spawn the conversation about what else we might be doing.
It's a good starting point. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Diane? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I know you've been working very hard, you and the subcommittee, particularly in the short term. So we really appreciate all the effort you have put into this and that you will put into it. Thank you very much. Nicole, do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say before I do the report, this is an exciting time to give this particular report from the Wi-Fi Technology Committee with all of the things happening that we've heard today with the research, as well as some of the recent announcements. So thank you for the opportunity to update and speak on behalf of the subcommittee for the Wi-Fi and the use of unlicensed spectrum for women, minorities, and small business owners. So the timing for our presentation could not be better, as the FCC champions one of the most aggressive plans to ensure that the nation does not experience a spectrum shortage that hinders our economic productivity, social engagement, and public benefits. And FCC Chairman Janikowski recently spoke to the importance of supporting unlicensed spectrum band to generate more robust wireless broadband on these lower band frequencies. In his own words, the chairman shared that unlicensed spectrum has a powerful record of driving innovation, driving investment, and economic growth. And Commissioner Rosenworcel was just here, echoed these sentiments when she shared that good spectrum policy has room for both licensed and unlicensed spectrum. So prior to this all happening, we had our committee, of which several members are here and represented on the phone, to actually look at this particular task. And this is a really important task, I think, whereas what Diane reported on in terms of going back and thinking about market barriers to entries in the past, we're sort of forward thinking, I think, with the task of this committee, particularly as unlicensed spectrum continues to generate billions in revenue, whether it comes to wireless connections through the home or business networks, live content streaming, smart metering, or telemedicine. These uses all contribute not only to consumers' effectiveness and efficiency, but also to the nation's bottom line, because they ultimately create jobs and opportunities, particularly in communities that are underserved and among women and small business owners. In the last meeting, our subcommittee offered a more verbal report that touched upon the engagement of these audiences and how this unlicensed spectrum technology could actually be used to bridge digital disparities. And we spoke about in this imagination frame that our group was in on the use of this type of spectrum to power up ebooks in low-income communities, or to offer virtual laboratories for research and development for emerging entrepreneurs. And I think this committee actually agreed that those were really great opportunities for communities of color, women, and small business owners. But as we did this, we also asked several minority tech entrepreneurs in a very non-empirical study, a very small sample. And in this survey, we found that the majority of them were not aware of the utility of unlicensed spectrum or understood how they could access that. The FCC was actually very generous with their time to speak about the need for compliant devices, in which our own subcommittee had an educational aha moment. But what we found with these entrepreneurs, that they also were not aware of these various compliance objectives. Clearly, unlicensed spectrum has already spurred innovations in Wi-Fi technology and the Internet-enabled devices that deliver content and or services. I just read an article recently, more than 800 million new Wi-Fi capable devices are sold each year. With that being said, again, we have the opportunity to be on the right side of history to ensure that we do not have those barriers to entry that will limit these populations from taking full advantage of the economic and social opportunities that are afforded. So with that, Mr. Chairman, and to all of the committee members, we would like to today just continue a conversation we've already had with ACPA around convening a formal workshop to raise the awareness and education around unlicensed spectrum technologies. The goal of this workshop would be twofold. One would be to raise the education and awareness level of minority entrepreneurs, women, and small business owners to understand the value proposition of unlicensed spectrum and hear best practices from those with experience on how to get products and services to the market. We feel that once you actually do this education, people have to also understand what the business proposition is. And because of the lack of understanding among these people that we surveyed, who were information managers, cloud computing specialists, et cetera, engineers, they have to know about it. So we thought that would be a great way to raise awareness as one of the goals of the workshop. The second goal, and I think we'll be working closely with the other task force, is to understand the specific market barriers to entry that does inhibit minority engagement in the space. Clearly, in this area, there are some barriers. We're not as familiar yet on what they specifically are, so we see that as part 2 of this workshop, or potentially emanating from the results of this workshop, but working closely with the Commission to see how we address that in the research that Tom actually spoke about and the other findings from the committees. And one of the recommendations we put out there for the committee is certainly we could host it here, but it's not a bad idea to take it on the road to actually see how other people, inventors, engineers, industry representatives, government, and investors are actually applying this spectrum. So in the end, and I will open it up to other committee members, we hope to work closely with the Commission to host this in the next few months and come back to this advisory group with results from these sessions. And as a sidebar, again, we're excited about what we've heard today, in particular myself, because I think that will help us to understand how we actually craft this particular space to make it much more amenable to open participation from these populations that are just now understanding the burgeoning potential of unlicensed spectrum technology. So I'm going to yield, much like Diane, because I have several committee members that are here, to make sure I didn't forget anything in my notes. I know Eric is here. I've heard Jose on the phone, and Don, I believe, is on the phone. Any other committee members on the phone? Did we forget anything?
No, I just wanted, it's Jose Marquez, and I'm the president of LISTA. I don't want to add anything to this, but I don't remember that we ever addressed the issue of having certain Latino and African American companies come in and address the Commission on some of these issues. I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, that was ever voted on, or did we ever have to vote on something like that? Just want a point of clarification.
I believe it was mentioned in the last meeting. I think it was brought up. And we have met, and that wasn't one that was in our report, but I'm not sure if that's something that also should be a sidebar, Tom, that we should talk about as well.
Yeah, I agree. Jose, why don't you circle back with Nicole on that question, and then we'll carry it up to Tom and see what next steps are most appropriate with that paradigm in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. In summary, we're ready to get to work.
Yes, indeed. I can see that. Any questions for Nicole? Yeah, Andy.
I find this extremely helpful and very important. I think that Wi-Fi is arguably, on a cost-benefit basis, the most effective thing the FCC has ever done in terms of regulatory cost-benefit. It yields unbelievable benefits, and there's so much more that can be done with unlicensed. My question is perhaps delicate. It's directed, I think, to you, Mr. Chairman. There are policy questions at the Commission level that could have a significant impact on the amount of spectrum available for unlicensed use in the years to come. Is it appropriate for this committee to weigh in with a recommendation that could be, for example, to maximize availability of unlicensed or whatever?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think, again, we want to work with Tom on that and have him talk with the chairman's office. And I think, Nicole, you need to liaise with Tom and see what we ought to do. But it's a good question.
Yeah, it is a great question, and one I think we should go into further discussion around, given the timing.
Other questions? No? Well, there's a lot going on, as you can see. We have one other subcommittee, and that's Channel 5 and 6, and the chairman was not able to be with us today. She's on an airplane. But, Tom, do you have any information about, I know you've been trying to have a conversation with Susan about next steps on that, and do you have anything that you can add?
Well, thanks, Henry. First, I'd like to thank all the subcommittees and the chairs for all the work that you've done in the last few months. I know it's been a heavy lift, and we certainly appreciate it. And I'd like to thank Carolyn and Nicole and Barbara, obviously, who go above and beyond and pulling this stuff together. So my hat's off to everyone. As to channels 5 and 6, just very, very briefly, Susan and I have been in contact. We, at least temporarily, have asked this subcommittee to hold. There are some larger questions that are at play, obviously, around incentive auctions and repacking and spectrum allocation that the agency is sort of hard at work on, and the issue of sort of any migration opportunities for AM radio on 5 and 6 are subsumed within those larger questions. So until the agency has resolved some of these issues and we understand what the spectrum map is going to look like, I think we're going to hold on this question for a little bit. All right.
That sounds right. So we'll be in touch with regard to that channels 5 and 6 going forward. And if any of you are on task forces, well, I know all of you are on task forces, but if any of you want to take on another task force, given the reports that you've seen today, please contact the subcommittee chair. You're welcome to join another task force, and they're happy to have the help. Just contact them and let me know, and we can certainly sign you up for another task force. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Sherman?
Mr. Chairman, this question is for you and to Tom. There's been a more discussion about this whole foreign ownership issue and the possibility of its expansion. And been some talk about how it might be an effective way to address the diversity of ownership question. My question to you and to Tom is, how will our committee be actively engaged in that whole issue? Because it's something that commissioners are talking about, the industry is talking about, and there may be a role that we can play with respect to that whole issue.
That's a very good question. Tom and I have not discussed that, and we will certainly do that. We are basically operating under a system where the commission asks us for input, and to the extent that they are interested in input from this committee on that subject, then we will get involved. But I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Tom about it, but I will do that.
And a formal petition is now pending with the commission that requests relief in that, so that complicates things a little bit.
Yeah. Tom, anything you want to say about that? Or?
In the context of what both Henry and Barbara said, I'm always happy to have a conversation about your thoughts on the subject, and certainly we could have a further conversations as to whether or not it's a viable issue for this committee to take up.
All right. That's a very good question, though, Sherman. Thank you for raising it. Anything else anyone wants to raise? Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, it was interesting hearing from the new commissioners, and it reminded me that there is a fairly long backlog of recommendations from this and prior versions of this committee to the FCC, and I'm wondering if we've had recently any status report on where any of those recommendations are, whether any of them are still under consideration.
Right. We have not had such a report, and I don't want to put Tom on the spot here. I didn't ask him to prepare a status report for us today, but I think we could certainly have one going forward. Tom, do you want to say anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think just candidly, I mean, we're referencing any number of recommendations that have been before the agency that have been put forth by this, prior iterations of this committee. I know we did a status report a couple years ago on standing on recommendations. I think, given the complexities of what the agency is working on at any given time, what's been helpful is if there are particular issues that individual groups want to raise, then I'm always happy to pull together the appropriate people within the agency to talk about those issues to determine whether there are viable actions that the agency can take with respect to those recommendations. I don't think it's productive frankly, when we reference, a host of recommendations, because it really doesn't pinpoint where the concerns are. I think one of the benefits of this committee is to address in a more laser-like fashion what issues we think we can work on and make some progress on. I found that I'm always available to have those conversations, and we can sort of discuss where particular initiatives are. And it gives me an opportunity to also talk to the individuals in the various offices and bureaus who have the laboring oar on those issues to sort of get them to provide some information on where those things are. So I think if there are particular recommendations that you or anyone else can identify that are of note, then we can have a discussion about those. I think that's a productive way forward.
It's such a dynamic industry that sometimes time makes some of the former recommendations no longer relevant, and sometimes they've been subsumed in other things that we've done or doing. So I agree with Tom, absolutely.
To that, I mean, I've had in my office, we've had numerous meetings with MMTC and other organizations that have raised recommendations, and we've talked about specific recommendations, and in point of fact, there are about 7 or 8 right now that my office is doing white papers on in terms of where they are, the issues that sort of continue to come up kind of perennially. So we're always at work on the issues that we think are top priority or that we think are low-hanging fruit. So by all means, reach out to me and we can talk about what's on the list.
So some still are under consideration. It's good news. Anything else anybody wants to raise? All right, seeing none, I want to again thank you for your work that you have done and that you will be doing, and for coming today and sharing your thoughts and advice and comments. I'm going to try to meet again in January, depending on when we can get access to this room. So watch your email. Barbara will be sending something out to all of you to schedule that, and hope you'll save the date on your calendar. Special thanks to Barbara for all her work on the committee. She's been a stalwart, and we're very grateful to you. So with that, we'll stand adjourned, and again, thank you.